Sony is just everywhere. It's the PlayStation in your living room, the music in your headphones, the movies you watch on the big screen. But this $100 billion empire with its hands in everything from electronics to robot dogs has a history that is just wild. We're talking brutal business battles, backstabbing partners, and maybe even a run-in with the North Korean government. So let's dive into the epic and often ruthless story of Sony. And it all really boils down to this one kind of crazy question. How on earth does a company that started with a spectacularly bad kitchen appliance in a war-torn country become a global titan? Well, the answer is this incredible story of impossible odds, relentless innovation, and some of the riskiest bets in business history. All right, so to really get Sony, we need to rewind the clock, way back to the end of World War II in Japan. And it's probably the worst place and the worst time on Earth to be thinking about starting a new company. But inside a bombed-out department store in Tokyo, two guys were about to do just that. I mean, the devastation was just absolute. Most of Japan's major cities had been firebombed into rubble. Almost half the entire population was homeless. There were no jobs, and for a lot of people, just surviving meant choosing between total desperation or joining the Japanese mafia, the Yakuza. This is the world they were born into. That's our starting point. And right in the middle of all this chaos, you've got our two founders, Akio Morita and Masaru Ibuka. Now, these guys met as engineers in the Navy, and while they hated using their skills to build weapons, they shared this incredible passion for technology. They dreamed of a future where engineering could actually make people's lives better, which is, an insanely optimistic vision when you look at the world around them. So in 1946, they make it official and start their company. Their very first product? An electric rice cooker. It either undercooked the rice or just burned it to a crisp. Yeah, a total flop. Next up, they tried an electric heating blanket. Also a failure and honestly probably pretty dangerous. But they kept at it, and they eventually found a little niche repairing radios, which led to their first small win in 1950, a tape recorder. It wasn't a world beater, but hey, it was a start. Okay, so that little success, it was about to crash right into a technology that would change, everything. This is the moment a tiny repair shop starts its journey to becoming a global brand, and it's all thanks to a piece of tech that was going to revolutionize electronics forever. On a business trip to the US, Akio Morita was just blown away by America's skyscrapers and how fast Germany was rebuilding. He knew Japan was falling behind. But the real turning point, it happens when a waiter puts a little paper umbrella on his dessert and proudly says it was made in Japan. For Morita, this wasn't funny. It was a moment of deep shame. And right then and there, his mission became crystal clear. He was going to transform the phrase made in Japan from a joke into a mark of world-class quality. Okay, so if you're gonna go global, you need a name that works everywhere. And Tokyo Telecommunications Engineering Corporation just wasn't gonna cut it. So they literally flipped through a dictionary, found the Latin word for sound, sonus, and mixed it with sunny, which was an American slang term for a young man. And boom, Sony. Short, catchy, and easy for anyone in the world to say. Now, their first really big hit, the TR-63, was sold as the world's first pocket-sized radio. Just one tiny little problem. It didn't actually fit in most shirt pockets. So what did they do? They had special shirts made for all their salesmen with slightly bigger pockets. So every time a salesman showed off the radio, it fit perfectly. I mean, a little sneaky, yeah, but was it genius marketing? Absolutely. All right, so Sony's on the map now, and they're about to enter this new phase, a series of super high-stakes battles that would threaten to destroy everything they built, but would also lead to some of their biggest wins. We're not just talking about launching products here. We're talking about all-out wars. And first up, a massive win. See, for decades, color TVs were kind of blurry, they were dim, and they were really expensive. Masaru Ibuka and his team spent years completely re-engineering the technology from the ground up and eventually created the Trinitron. It was so much brighter and sharper than anything else out there. Over the next few decades, they sold a staggering 290 million of them, becoming the world's biggest TV manufacturer and even winning an Emmy. But right after that huge win came a crushing loss. In 1975, Sony launched Betamax, this revolutionary video cassette recorder. It had way better image quality than its rival, VHS. It was, technically, the better product. So why did the better product lose? Well, it's pretty simple, actually. VHS tapes were cheaper, and they could record 4 times as much stuff. For your average person, convenience and cost beat quality every time. Millions of dollars invested, all down the drain. The company was just hemorrhaging money at this point. That Betamax failure was a massive blow. So Akio Morita made this incredibly bold bet on his next idea, a portable cassette player with headphones called the Walkman. And pretty much everyone thought he was crazy. Who would want a device that could only play music, not record it? But Morita was so sure, he literally bet his entire career on it with that one statement. So how did that bet pay off? The Walkman sold 385 million units. It wasn't just a hit product, it basically invented a whole new culture. For the very first time, you could create a personal soundtrack for your own life, listening to your music wherever you went. Morita's crazy, risky bet didn't just save Sony, it completely changed the world.
So after completely dominating consumer electronics, Sony has this big realization. Selling the hardware, the players and TVs, that's only half the battle. The real power, that comes from controlling the software, the music, the movies, the games. It was time to build a real empire. And their strategy for the compact disc, which they developed with Philips, it was just a work of art. They built this perfect self-feeding business machine. First, they sold their own Sony CD players. Then, they licensed the CD tech to other companies and collected royalties. Then, they bought CBS Records, so they literally owned the music. And finally, they pressed the physical CDs in their own factories. You see how that works? Every part of the business fed every other part, creating this unstoppable snowball of profit. So Sony's swimming in cash now, and they're looking at the next big thing, video games. They actually had a pretty good relationship with Nintendo since they built the sound system for the Super Nintendo. So they went to them with a proposal. Let's partner up on a new CD add-on for the console. CDs were way more powerful than cartridges. It looked like a perfect partnership, right? A match made in heaven. But Nintendo started getting nervous, real paranoid. They were afraid Sony would use this CD technology to just launch its own console and steal all their game developers. So, Nintendo decided to betray Sony first. At a huge public event, they announced they were moving forward with a CD add-on, but with Philips, Sony's own partner in creating the CD. This wasn't some quiet breakup. It was public, it was humiliating, it was absolutely brutal. Back at Sony, people were furious, livid. But that anger, it turned into fuel. Instead of just ditching the project, they decided they were going to get revenge. They were going to push forward, all by themselves, and build their very own console. And that project, the one born out of this epic betrayal, well, that became the Sony PlayStation. And talk about revenge, because the PlayStation used CDs, games could be bigger, way more ambitious, and cheaper to make than Nintendo's cartridges. Game developers flocked to Sony. The PlayStation went on to sell over 100 million units, absolutely crushing Nintendo, and announcing Sony as the new king of the console wars. So this win really cemented Sony's place as this massive entertainment conglomerate. Their modern legacy would be defined by some incredibly smart deals that paid off in the billions, and one huge challenge that nearly brought the whole company to its knees. Okay, check this out. In 1998, Marvel Comics was completely bankrupt. Sony Pictures saw a chance and asked to buy the film rights to their most popular character, Spider-Man. And the price they paid for him? Get this, a measly $7 million. That one deal has since made them nearly $9 billion. And here's a fun fact. Marvel actually offered Sony the rights to all their characters, including Iron Man and the Avengers, for just $25 million. But Sony executives said nobody cared about the others. Big, big oops. But hey, it hasn't all been home runs. In 2014, Sony got hit by one of the biggest data breaches in history. Hackers stole terabytes of data, leaking super embarrassing executive emails, employee info, even entire movies that hadn't been released yet. The FBI officially blamed North Korea, saying it was retaliation for a comedy film that made fun of their leader. Now, a lot of cybersecurity experts aren't so sure about that, and who really did it is still up for debate. So you go from a failed rice cooker in a city turned to rubble to a global empire built on a foundation of high-risk bets and just a flat-out refusal to quit. They've won wars, they've lost wars, they've been betrayed, and they've fought their way to the top of so many different industries. Today, they're looking at everything from electric cars to banking. And that really leaves us with just one final question. What industry are they going to disrupt next?